A restless breeze swept across the boundless expanse of ice, carrying the faint tang of brine and the distant groan of shifting floes. The expedition's tents, bright orange against the endless white, lay clustered near a slender ribbon of meltwater where the shelf met the sea. Above them, the sky was the color of spent steel, the sun a muted glow behind a veil of drifting snow. Dr. Ingrid Hansen crouched beside a borehole where her instruments recorded salinity and temperature. Her breath plumed in the air as she jotted notes in the notebook strapped to her thigh, while her teammates stood in a loose semicircle, their heavy parkas and fur-lined hoods blending into the frozen landscape. Every exhale seemed loud in the vast stillness, every scrape of metal against ice a sudden intrusion on the silence. Then, as she pressed her weight on the ice core sampler, a soft hiss rose on the wind, a sound so pure and unexpected that it stilled the team at once. It was a whistle, clear and high, as though some hidden flute were calling across the desolate plain. Heads snapped up from the tenders and tools, eyes scanning the horizon. From the edge of the camp, just beyond the last sled and stacked fuel drums, a great shape lumbered into view. The bull walrus emerged from a shallow meltwater channel, his mottled hide gleaming with droplets of fresh melt. He hauled himself onto the shelf with deliberate slowness, flippers carving shallow furrows in the snow as he creaked forward. His long tusks caught what little light remained, their ivory curve a stark silhouette against the wind-scoured expanse. The scientists watched, breathless, as he shook his whiskers and settled with regal calm. Then, in that suspended moment, the walrus filled the air with a second, more insistent whistle. This one layered and urgent, each note rising and falling like a word in an ancient language. It cut through the howl of the gale and the distant snap of ice, reaching even to the farthest tent flap. Ingrid felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. The walrus's eyes, dark and deep, met hers as if he were addressing them directly. His whistle rose again, carried on a sudden lull in the wind, and in its clarity lay a warning. Far below where the water lapped against the ice-scalloped edge, something was stirring, an unseen fracture in the shelf, a hidden seam ready to split. The team exchanged urgent glances. Their instruments had shown nothing unusual, their maps marked no danger, yet here stood nature's own sentinel, proclaiming an alarm no gauge could register. Rocks of pockmarked ice groaned in time with his call, as though echoing his grave melody. For a heartbeat, Ingrid stood frozen, torn between curiosity and caution. Then, she snapped her gloved fingers, rallying her team to step back from the fragile edge. Sled runners scraped the ice as they withdrew, eyes never leaving the walrus, whose whistle had cut through their certainty and compelled them to reconsider their every assumption. Behind them, the shelf's surface settled into silence once more, but the notes of that second whistle lingered on the wind, an uncanny refrain that would shape the fate of the expedition in the days to come. For in that moment, a walrus had spoken, his raucous whistle a harbinger of cracking ice, and the scientists realized they were no longer masters of this frozen realm, but guests heeding the call of a wild guardian. The camp had barely settled after the walrus's first cry when the wind shifted, carrying a harsher, more urgent note across the ice. It began as a low hum, hardly more than a vibration beneath their boots, but rose rapidly into a crisp, piercing whistle, a sound neither human nor machine could mimic. Ingrid looked up from her instruments, her pen hovering over the notebook, as the whistle cut through the still air again, each tone trembling with warning. Her companions froze around her, hearts hammering in their chests. The whistle came not from the direction of the melting channel, but from along the shelf's edge, where snow overhung unseen waters. The walrus remained at the fringe of camp, his bulk half buried in drifts, tusks pointed toward the crackling horizon. He repeated the whistle, twice, then thrice, in a staccato rhythm that demanded attention. Slowly the researchers rose, following the invisible line his call had drawn across the ice. Their boots made soft, crunching tracks as they moved in single file, heads bent against the cold gusts that threatened to carry the warning away. The walrus waddled alongside them, matching their pace. Each time they hesitated or strayed, he punctuated the silence with another sharp whistle, as though to scold their uncertainty. Their breath fogged in the air as they neared a section of ice that sagged subtly underfoot. Instruments that had once registered stable readings now wavered. Thermometers dipped, and pitch meters hummed with low-frequency creaks. The walrus paused at that very spot, head tilted, whiskers quivering, and delivered one final resonant whistle that echoed off the frozen plain like a starting bell. In that moment, the team understood. The ice beneath them was betraying its strength. What appeared solid from a distance was a delicate tapestry of thinning plates and hidden fractures. Thanks to the walrus's extraordinary whistle, nature's acoustic alarm, they stepped back, leaving the weakened ice to groan and buckle behind them, narrowly avoiding a calving crack that rent the shelf in two mere heartbeats later. In the wake of that urgent whistle, Ingrid and her team gathered close to study the fragile ice's surface. They had begun the morning confident in their instruments: handheld ground-penetrating radar, thermal scanners, and seismic pickups. But all had remained calm. Now, as the wind died in the brief lull the walrus's call had created, every gauge sprang to life with subtle anomalies. Ingrid knelt beside a hairline fissure, running barely visible beneath a dusting of fresh snow. Her gloved fingertips traced its length, a thin scar that pulsed with mechanical life when she placed her thermal pen against it. Where she had expected uniform chill, she found sudden warmth, the hidden rumble of water seeping and expanding. Other team members knelt along the shelf's edge, sweeping their seismic monitor rods across the ice. Each pass awakened a faint, rolling throb that matched the cadence of the walrus's whistle. Standing above the crack, the walrus let out a softer, prolonged note, almost mournful in its depth, and rested his great head upon the ice. It was as if he were confirming their discovery, drawing their focus to the precise line of danger. With solemn nods, Ingrid's colleagues gathered around, marking the fisher's course with spray-painted flags and snapping photos. Under the walrus's watchful eye, they retreated to consult their data, correlating the crack's direction with known ocean currents beneath the shelf. Seismic echoes had traced the growth of the fracture over the past tidal cycles, but only the walrus's natural sonar had revealed its true urgency. By the time the team returned, the fissure had lengthened, gaps widening under the weight of sky-blue ice, ready to sweep them into the dark swell. Ingrid turned back to the walrus, awe and gratitude mingling in her chest. His whistle had guided them, not just to detect a crack, but to understand its peril, that the ice beneath their feet was alive, moving, and at any moment could detach in a thunderous calving. And so, with respectful haste, they packed their gear and set a new course away from the shelf's ever-shifting edge, their footsteps echoing across safe ground as the walrus remained, a vigilant sentry whose own whistle had taught them to listen to the language of ice. With the fissure's width now plainly visible, the team moved swiftly to break camp and retreat to safer ground. Ingrid gathered her instruments, radar units, thermal scanners, and seismic rods, stowing them in padded cases. The others dismantled tents and lashed equipment onto sleds, their breath fogging in the cold air as they worked with steady urgency. All the while, the walrus ambled alongside, his great bulk sliding over the ice as if on tracks. Whenever the scientists veered too close to the fracture's newly exposed lip, he paused and raised his head, emitting a soft, low whistle that sent a clear warning through the crisp air. Each call directed them toward firmer ice, guiding their sleds over hidden stress lines and away from unstable flows. At one point, Ingrid ventured too near the fissure's edge, her crampons slipping on a sheet of glazed ice. The walrus's whistle surged, urgent and insistent, as he planted his flippers behind her feet. Startled, she regained her footing and stepped back, brushing snow from her cuffs. Around her, the team murmured in relief, recognizing the walrus's protective role. They followed his route, a path of solid ice that curved gently inland, veering away from the dark waters, lapping far below. As they moved, the walrus's calls punctuated the journey, short bursts when the ice felt uncertain, softer notes when they passed over secure ground. Even in that silent expanse, his voice offered a map more reliable than any chart. At last, They crested a rise where the shelf broadened into a plateau of unbroken white. Beyond lay the safety of landfast ice and the promise of rescue aircraft waiting on firmer terrain. The walrus let out a final echoing whistle, standing sentinel as the scientists loaded their sleds onto snowmobiles and prepared for the next stage of their journey. As the machines roared to life and the team set off, Ingrid paused to bid farewell to the walrus. He watched them go, his whiskers catching the weak sunlight, then vanished into the shadows of a nearby pressure ridge. In his place remained only the faint echo of that guiding whistle, a testament to a wild guardian whose knowledge of cracking ice had carried the expedition from peril to safety. No sooner had the expedition team gained firmer ice than a distant roar shattered the brittle stillness. Far beyond the walrus's retreating silhouette, a towering wall of ice peeled away from the shelf's edge in a thunderous collapse. Sheets of frosted blue plunged into the dark sea with a spray of mist, sending shockwaves rippling across the frozen plain. The scientists stumbled, sleds rattling as the tremor coursed through the ice beneath their feet. Whitened spines of fractured ice sprang up in webbing cracks, while the roar's echo lingered in the pale sky like a warning refrain. Ingrid's breath caught as she snapped her headlamp toward the calving front, a living glacier releasing its burden in a single cataclysmic moment. Panic flickered among the team, but the walrus's earlier guidance had taught them to trust nature's signals. Instinctively, they glanced to where he had last stood and saw him emerge onto a nearby pressure ridge, head raised in stoic watchfulness. Without hesitation, they regrouped, following the ridge's crest to a natural ice cave hewn by wind and water. Inside that hollow shelter, they pressed close against the walls, chests echoing with the roar of distant ice. The cave's roof dripped with melting frost, and its floor glowed faintly as pooled water reflected their headlamps. There, in that unexpected refuge, they found calm amid chaos, safe from the crumbling shelf and the swirling spindrift outside. As the last echoes of calving faded, Ingrid unstrapped her pack and produced hot broth from insulated flasks, passing cups to her shivering colleagues. Each sip warmed them against the lingering tremor beneath their feet. Through the cave's narrow entrance, they watched sheets of broken ice drift seaward, disappearing into the polar night, testament to how close they had come to disaster. It was in that sheltered silence, hearts still racing, that the team fully grasped the depth of the walrus's warning. His whistle had not only revealed the crack's threat, but had also led them to a haven born of the ice itself. And as they warmed in that wind-scarred ice cave, they honored the wild sentinel who had transformed a calving catastrophe into a story of survival, a story that would echo across the ice for years to come. When the roar of the calving ice finally faded, the team lingered in the quiet glow of their ice cave sanctuary, steam rising from their metal mugs as they gathered strength for the trek home. Outside, the wind had eased, leaving the world pristine and almost reverent under the pale light. Ingrid led the way out, her boots crunching the slushy floor, eyes scanning for the familiar landmarks the walrus had shown them. Their sleds glided silently across the firm ice, following the gentle undulations of the pressure ridge that had served as their safe corridor. With each careful step, the memory of the walrus's guiding whistle echoed in their minds, a testament to its uncanny awareness of shifting dangers. As they crossed the meltwater channel, they saw his bulk silhouetted against the horizon, his tusks outlined by the last of the pale light, watching until they had passed beyond sight. At their original campsite, tents lay half buried in drifts, but intact. The team moved swiftly to thaw frozen zippers and stake down ice-laden guy lines. There, Ingrid paused and pressed her hand to the cold pole bearing the expedition flag, recalling how near they had come to losing more than just gear to the shifting shelf. She dug through her pack for her field recorder and whispered into the mic, delivering deep ice findings and gratitude to our wild guide. That evening, as the northern lights shimmered overhead, the scientists created a small memorial at the camp's edge, a simple circle of stones crowned with a carved ivory tusk they had brought as a tribute. Around it, They draped a length of bright orange ribbon, echoing the tents they had left behind, tying a knot for each warning the walrus had sounded. Gathered there under the dancing aurora, they raised their mugs in a silent toast to the sentinel of the ice. In the hush that followed, a distant, low whistle drifted across the frozen plain. Though faint, it carried unmistakable meaning, a final farewell from the walrus who had warned them, guided them, and ensured their safe return from the edge of disaster. Back at the old driftwood settlement on the ice shelf, the team gathered beneath a sky woven with pale green and violet ribbons. Lanterns cast a warm glow on the packed snow as Ingrid and her companions constructed a simple shrine just beyond their tent line. A weather-smoothed tusk, carved from a fallen walrus horn, was laid atop a circle of stones, each stone gathered from the shelf's edge where the great creature had first appeared. They draped a length of bright fabric between two ice-spiked poles, mimicking the vibrant color of their expedition tents that had once dotted the white expanse. From this banner hung small tokens of gratitude, a battered compass face, a broken ice axe spike, and a handful of spent drill bits, all reminders of tools that might have been lost had they not heeded the walrus's call. The team formed a loose ring around the memorial, breath misting in the frigid air. One by one, they stepped forward to lay gifts at the tusk's base. Ingrid placed her notebook, its pages filled with charts and observations. Carlos offered a smooth pebble he had carried for luck. Priya gently set her field recorder, the device that had captured the creature's whistle. And Marcus left behind a length of rope from his pack, the rope that had bound them to safety. In the hush that followed, they raised their mugs of steaming broth in silent salute. Above them, the aurora pulsed like the beating heart of the north, and somewhere on the distant floe, the bull walrus's haunting whistle drifted back to them, a final blessing carried on the wind. It was a sound they would never forget, a wild alarm that had cracked through the white silence, led them away from the shelf's fracture, guided them to refuge, and ushered them back to home. As the team departed at dawn's first light, their sleds cutting tracks away from the shrine, each member cast one last backward glance. The tusk gleamed softly in the lantern glow, and the banner fluttered against the pale sky, a frozen testament to the walrus, who had spoken when the ice itself was mute, whose whistle had become their most precious guide, and whose memory would stand as long as the shelf endured.